Hello and welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me today for a little book shopping vlog that takes us all the way out to LA. My partner and I were visiting Los Angeles over the fall to visit a couple friends who had moved out there over the last couple of years. Neither of us had ever been to California, so it was a really exciting trip. We visited two bookstores that I was really jazzed to see while we were there. The first of which was the Ripped Bodice. This is a romance-only bookstore with just incredibly beautiful decor and super friendly staff who were literally willing to talk about any book on their shelves. While I was there, I did pick up two books that I was pretty excited about and read over the course of our trip. After that visit, we also popped by the Last Bookstore, which is this massive and iconic bookshop in downtown LA. They have really cool displays and artwork in addition to their book selection. So really cool like arches made of books and flying book displays and a whole sort of artist gallery on the upper floor. So that was a really great stop as well. Besides those bookstores, we obviously really took advantage of our time in LA. So we spent time at the beach. We spent time going to a couple ball games. We're big baseball fans. And we actually visited two national parks while we were there. We went all the way out to the Channel Islands and then inland to Joshua Tree National Park. Over the course of our time there, I did pick up and start reading one of the two books that I had purchased. And upon returning home, I finished that book and picked up the second one. So I thought I would take this time to go ahead and just recap those for you after such a delightful trip. Hello. So obviously we are back and we are in our new place. So you'll recognize this background is a little bit different than you may have seen before. But let's talk about the books that I picked up while we were in California. I ended up purchasing both of the books on our trip at the Ripped Bodice, which is just this absolutely gorgeous romance-only bookstore. I think they're like flagship stores in LA, and they recently opened a bookstore in New York as well. So they're pretty well known. I know I've followed like their Instagram account for a long time. While I was there, I picked up two books. The first is The Runaway Duchess, and the second was The Davenports. So I read The Davenports first. This is by Crystal Marquis. This is her debut novel, and it was so good. So really big kudos to her. The Davenports is inspired by a real-life story of C.R. Patterson, who was a Black man who escaped slavery in the South in the 1800s. And in the early 1900s, at the turn of the century, founded a very successful motor vehicle company, kind of at the time where we turned away from carriages and towards the car. He was incredibly wealthy and successful. He had a family, and the author kind of just wanted to imagine what the life of those girls, his daughters, might have been like, which gave us The Davenports. So the story is set in the 1910s and is in Chicago, which is really fun for me because I live in Chicago as well. And it follows four different perspectives. So the two Davenport daughters, the eldest of whom, Olivia, is sort of prim and proper and perfect. And her younger sister, Helen, who kind of rebuffs all feminine tradition and really is a very skilled carriage and car mechanic. And really is working hard with her brother to formulate business plans for how the company is going to progress out of carriages and into cars, as that seems to be where the market is going. So she's a really skilled engineer and business thinker, and doesn't really fit the form factor for a traditional girl of her age at all. It also follows their close family friend Ruby, and her dad is running for mayor of Chicago. So we have some of the like political elite in the Black community and seeing those early pushes for political space and engagement through her lens as well. And then last but not least, we follow a woman who is a maid to the Davenport family named Amy Rose. Amy Rose is an immigrant to America. She and her mother were hired on as staff by the Davenports when the Davenport daughters were very young. So she really grew up with them and is both their close friend and also their employee. And she dreams of leaving their employ and instead opening her own hair salon and selling her own line of hair products. All of the main characters are really well fleshed out, especially given that there are 4 perspectives. I think that was really well balanced. And given the time and the identities of the people involved, the story also really leans into social injustice. You see the ways in which wealth has elevated the Davenport family, but also kept them separate from their own community and from the community of wealthy white elites at the time. Olivia is really challenged as she is introduced to the civil rights movement and really grapples with what they are saying about how most people who look like her live versus her own lived experience and wanting to protect and preserve what her family has. So I think it grapples with really interesting themes, and it felt like it had a lot more weight than, other historical fiction narratives in the romance genre. I loved this book so much, and the next book comes out in 2024, so I'm really jazzed about the sequel. The other book I read was The Runaway Duchess by Joanna Lowell. This is actually a second book in a series, which I didn't realize when I picked it up, but you don't really need to read them in order at all. Like a lot of romance books, it just follows 2 different people who were kind of vaguely related to the main characters of the first book. So this is the story of a young woman whose family has fallen on hard times. She's really fallen out of social grace and is forced by her mother to marry a wicked old man. It's gross. It's deeply upsetting for her. And she is absolutely terrified. She literally makes herself sick on her wedding night to protect her from what is to come. And while traveling for her honeymoon, kind of escapes the watch of her husband and her maid and stumbles into the arms of a botanist who is there at the train station waiting for a fellow botanist and sort of plant expert, and who mistakes her for that other woman. And so what we have ultimately is the story of mistaken identity and 2 people from very different worlds falling in love. As a big plant geek myself, I was really excited by the idea that we were following plant hunters and botanists in this sort of age of discovery and the era that gave us a lot of the great greenhouses and botanical gardens that we all get to enjoy today. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of sort of romping around the English countryside, a lot of good laughs that can come out of the mistaken identity trope. But I felt like it did a good job of resolving the mistaken identity before we got too deep into the weeds of consent issues, which I was glad for. And it definitely grappled with some of the very stark realities that women at the time faced when thinking about marriage as an economic prospect, and the many forms of violence that come with that. But I did feel like it lacked some of the depth that other books I've read in the genre, including the Davenports, have featured. So this was a good book. It was a fun book, but it wasn't a great book. I think I gave it a 3.5 stars. So I'm glad I picked it up, and it was, entertaining for what it was, but it wasn't a book that I absolutely adored. Well, that's all I have. Thanks for joining me on this little journey out to Los Angeles, taking a look around these bookshops with me and recapping the books that I read. Let me know if any of you have been out to LA and seen some of these stores yourself. If you have other spots you'd recommend, I'm sure we'll be going back to see our friends again and would love your recommendations on where else to visit. And definitely let me know what you're loving in the historical romance genre as of late. This was like a really big emerging genre for me in 2023. And I'm really looking forward to picking up more books like this in 2024. Anyway, thanks for being here, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!